All right. Hello, and welcome to video 4. And in this video, we are going to be talking about digital art. So, so in the previous video, we kind of started discussing the basics of making art. So we talked about sketching, and we talked about referencing. Those were kind of the two main key points that we talked about. And we're going to try to apply both of these into the next few videos to learn how to create a digital art piece. So before we get into the details or the nitty-gritty stuff of the applications, I'm going to give a general overview on how to approach digital art, because I know it can be really intimidating, and it can be really intimidating, especially with the whole Adobe suite and everything. If you're not, I know that personally I didn't feel very technologically confident enough to explore Photoshop and stuff like that. I was a little scared at first to get into those applications, because it's a lot and it's an intimidating interface to someone that has never approached it before. So I'm gonna give you a easier alternative that is way more beginner friendly. So first of all, when you're making digital art, you want some kind of tool that's going to help you translate that digital art. So for that, I highly recommend, if you don't already have one, getting a Wacom tablet. And this is basically a tablet that allows you to draw onto the pad, and it'll translate it directly into your computer. And it's really helpful, and it's pretty cheap if you're looking for the older versions. Alternatively, an iPad is also great. An iPad's awesome for making digital art. You could use applications like Procreate, or you can use the application that I'm using, which is Sketchbook. And you can get an iPad version of this. Make sure you have an Apple Pencil too with your iPad. That's important. That's a horrible apple. But yes, make sure you have something that you can draw with. So either iPad with Sketchbook or a Wacom tablet, and Wacom tablets plug into your PC, so that's great. If you already have these two, if you already have one of these, that's awesome. So the application that I use is called Sketchbook, Autodesk Sketchbook, and it's completely free on both Apple and Android stores. Or you can just download it online. It's a great application. And the reason that I like Sketchbook so much as opposed to the Adobe suite, for example, Photoshop or Illustrator, is because it makes things really, really simple, and the interface is way less intimidating. And the interface is very user-friendly, and it's great for beginners. This is what I started using, and this is what I still use to this day. Even though I have learned Photoshop and Illustrator, I still prefer this because it's just really easy and really simple to use. I don't have to look up tutorials. Everything that I need is already in front of me. So let's get started. So the first thing with digital art that you want to kind of know about is the idea of layers. So in Sketchbook, this is the layout that you kind of start off with. I just changed my layout to the default layout. So if you go here to this button right here, this is the layer tool. So in the layer tool, you can create multiple layers. You can duplicate layers, add layers, or delete layers. So this comes in really handy because when you start layering your drawings, or like components of your drawings on different like layers, you can, so for example, if I drew a line here, and like a line here, and a line here, you can hide them. You can work on each individual layer separately, and if you go here, you can actually lower the opacity of each layer. So you can really play around with each component if you're working on separate layers, which is what I highly recommend. So, starting off, so in the last video, in the first video, we talked about sketching. So, one of the most ideal ways to begin a digital illustration is to import kind of like a pencil sketch that you've already done, and this can just be done through scanning the piece of paper that you're working on. That's great, and just import it into the sketchbook application, and then you can start tracing over it in this layer. So if you want to import a photo, go to File, Add Image. See, it's super user-friendly. Okay, so I'm just going to take a random, this is a watercolor piece that I did the other day. It's probably more helpful if you take a pencil sketch, but anything's fine. Even something like this is actually great because when you transfer it digitally, you can manipulate and play around with this a lot more. So what you want to do is we want to take the image layer, and when we import it, it's going to look like this. And you can change the size of this image by going to this tool right here, the quick transform tool, and you can resize and manipulate the image. You can rotate it, do whatever you want. Resize. You can even like scale it, which I'm not going to do. But yeah, so you can play around with the image. I'm just going to keep it that size. And then an important thing when you're when you're tracing your own pencil sketch is it's important to lower the opacity of the initial image because then you can actually see what you're doing. And you lower opacity again here, and it'll tell you at the bottom how much you're lowering it by. So I usually like to keep my reference images on like a 30%. Even though it's my own drawing, I still want to, as I mentioned before with the tracing, I still want to be loose with it and capture just the shapes, even though this is already my own pencil sketch. You still don't want to exactly copy it because then it doesn't look realistic. And then you can drag the reference layer to the very bottom of your layer thing, and you just do that by clicking this and just holding it down and dragging it. So again, super easy. This is if you want to lock the layer. I like to lock my reference layer because, I mean, you're not going to change that, so why not? And then what I like to do is I like to use the pencil tool first, because the different procedures or the different steps that at least I like to take is I like to do pencil, and then I like to do ink. And this ink pen is really handy because it changes with the amount of pressure that you give it. And it feels like a real ink pen. So that's a great tool. And then I like to add color with the ink pen as well. So I mainly just use these two brushes for my art. And the reason I don't immediately go in and do line art is because the if I did do that, it would look very fake. First of all, it would look very almost two-dimensional, and we want it to look like we are painting it online and not just copying it. So okay, so we've gotten that out of the way. So pencil sketch first, but let me just talk about brushes really quickly, because brushes are very important and can make or break your artwork when you're doing digital art. So the great thing about doing art digitally is that you have all of these, I guess you could say, like, materials or mediums at your disposal. And I say medium with air quotations because obviously they're not actually, mediums, but they do replicate the texture that these mediums give pretty efficiently. So for Sketchbook, what you can do is, so when you're first introduced to the application, you have these brushes here, and I think you only have one row. I might be mistaken, but I think you just have one row, and you can add a lot more. You can add more brushes, add as many as you want. I mean, I think you can add a certain amount till a certain amount, but yeah. So how you add brushes is you go to this button right here. You click on that, and you get your brush library, and this shows you the different kinds of brushes that you can use. So you have your basic brushes, so this is just like your pencil. This is a set that you're usually given. Like, this is a basic initial starting out set, and it has pretty much everything you need. You have your lining tool, you have your sketching tool, you have a few different textures. You could do a paintbrush, a chisel tip pen, which gives you even finer lines. This one's awesome as well if you want to do more like comic kind of art. You have your marker, and then if we move down, we have texture essentials. Sorry, and these are actually awesome because they add such a fun texture to the artwork. Like, look at that. That's awesome, and it really elevates your artwork. I like to use texturing I like to use these tools after I've done my sketch. So when I'm painting, or even after I've done painting, to add some effects. So these are really nice for that. I love this tool. There's also a signature ink tool, which is really cool. You have a dry marker, watercolor brush, and I think this is new on Sketchbook, or they've introduced it in a recent-ish update. But they have a Copic collection, and you actually have a set. You can actually get a Copic library where they have a bunch of these Copic colors, and these actually do match with the actual Copic markers that you get, the color number at least. So yeah, that's awesome, and they have these different Copic nibs that you can use along with the colors. So that is a great tool if you like Copics and you want to translate that digitally. And then you have your synthetic paint brushes. This is great if you want more of a painted, like oil or acrylic kind of look. These are great. They actually also almost blend blend or like feel like paint as well, because if you go over them again, they get thicker and more defined, and you can really play around with them and merge and create all of these cool like transitions as well with paintbrushes. And then you have your traditional, so these are all like your pencils, and your soft erasers, felt tip, paintbrush, yeah. Then these, so the next few are really cool because they're pre-made textures, and I think you can import, no, you can, I'm not sure if you can import brushes onto Sketchbook, but I know that you can on Procreate. You can import certain brushes into Procreate and use them as well, which is awesome. Many artists create their own brush print, and it's awesome. Great textures. But these are some of the textures that you can get on Sketchbook, and they're really cool. You know, we have there's like a dot one, splash, and if you play around with these with the right colors and the right opacity, they can actually look really, really awesome in paintings, and they really like elevate the art to another level. And then you have your smudge tools. So this is great if you want to create a really like smooth, soft looking surface because it smudges the colors together. And you have different kinds of smudge tools. Then we have our designer tools, our artist tools, our soft pastels, and these are more kind of like blending, like lightening tools as well, like colorless brushes. But yeah, that's basically it. I'm not going to go into detail of every single brush, but I went into like the different genres of brushes that we have. So the main ones that I like to work with are the pencil tool, the pencil tool, and the inking pen, and I like working with a hard eraser and a soft eraser for different purposes. I'll get into this more when we talk about coloring and shading in later episodes, but I personally like, yeah. And then, I like using the pencil, the pen, and a few texture tools depending on the mood or the theme of the painting that I'm looking for. And if I'm doing more of a painting look, I like to use these synthetic paintbrushes. I especially love this one. I think it creates such a cool, oh no, did I lock that there? But yeah, the synthetic paintbrush, it creates such cool textures, and I love using it. It feels just like using a paintbrush, so yeah. Alright, so what's next? So I'm just going to go over one more thing, which is manipulating these brushes. So if you want to change the size or the anything of a particular brush, say for example the inking pen, you can double click on it and it'll open a brush properties page. And in this you can change the size of the inking pen. You can make it small, you can make it really big, and you can also change the opacity of the pen itself, so it becomes lighter as opposed to this. So yeah, and then you can see through as well, which is awesome. That's really cool. But I personally like changing the opacity here because it's something that I can manipulate after the artwork as well. All right, so now let's just go. All right, so we can just start making a pencil sketch. So I'm gonna a good habit is to do your pencil sketch in a different color. So I like to do it in maybe like red. And yeah, so this is kind of similar to the video where that I made last time, where I talked about referencing and tracing and how to trace using shapes as opposed to using outlining. Alright, so now that we have our pencil sketch, we can actually hide our initial reference layer and just clean up a little with, and then we can manipulate certain elements of this now actually, because I'm just going to duplicate this in case, just to protect the layer in case I want to come back to it. But if we go here again in the lasso, in the quick transform tool, and we click on this one, which is the lasso tool. This is actually on Photoshop as well, but I feel like here it's a really easy interface. It's just like a click away. We can outline certain elements of the sketch and move it. So, for example, if I want the eyebrows to be in a different position, I can pick them up and then I can move them. If I do that, and then just do a quick cleanup. Again, double tap, and the eraser becomes smaller. So yeah, you can easily transform certain parts of the image like that. Another thing that you can do is you can actually Control-C and Control-V and kind of just copy and paste the image again, which is awesome. And you have two of them. And this is helpful if you want to replicate the face, or like, you know, create multiple versions of the same thing. So yeah, that is it for today's video. Next video, I'll talk more about the concept of line art and coloring. So stay tuned for that, and I will catch you later. Thank you.